My name is Dr. Peter Redpath. Welcome to this course on the one and the many, an introductory course in a program of studies consisting of 4 courses presented by the Adler Aquinas Institute in the Holy Apostles College and Seminary, St. John Paul II, Thomistic Studies Graduate Concentration in Christian Wisdom. As far as my personal background goes and how we got this started with Holy Apostles, I've been teaching on the college and university level for over 45 years. I started in 1968 teaching on the college level as a graduate teaching assistant and fellow at the State University of New York at Buffalo. And since that time, I've taught in a number of different venues, a number of different public and private colleges, and done a number of teaching performances in one way or another at different institutes, and lectured extensively, both nationally and internationally. And I have a specialization in the history of philosophy as well as in St. Thomas, among other things. I presently live in Arizona, just north of Scottsdale, in a town called Cave Creek. And I retired as a full professor from St. John's University in 2010 to set up an institute called the Adler Aquinas Institute. And I did that, among other reasons, because I thought I would have a lot more freedom to develop research and pursue avenues of interest that I could not do while a member of full-time faculty at St. John's. And my interest in this issue of the problem of the one and the many. One of the things which I discovered while teaching on the university level for the extensive amounts of time which I had done was that I had come to realize that the members of the higher educational community had more or less lost their understanding of higher education. This is something that Adler had discovered decades before I did and had written about. And that's one of the reasons why I had been interested in him. I had, in the 1980s, come across an amazing statement by one of the leading Catholic intellectuals of the 20th century, Jacques Maritain, in a work called The Peasant of the Garonne, in which Maritain begged his readers not to take the statement that he was going to make to be the pronouncement of a crazy old man, when he said that modern contemporary idealists, subjective idealists, were not philosophers. And having a good deal of respect for Maritain's intellectual insights, if not in total agreement with him on everything, I thought I would pursue that to see whether or not Maritain was right. And so I engaged in a study of the history of philosophy, which I detail in 3 books that was published by a Dutch publisher called Editions Rodopi. I was the executive editor for a book series that they did called the Value Inquiry book series. And it was published there, and I did works in a trilogy, one called, historically, let me give you the titles. One called Wisdom's Odyssey from Philosophy to Transcendental Sophistry. That was actually published second, but in a way it was written first. But I published the first work on René Descartes, which historically comes second because he's the person, I think, who initiated what I call transcendental sophistry. And the work is called The Dream of Descartes. No, I'm sorry. That's Maritain work. My work was called Cartesian Nightmare, an introduction to transcendental sophistry. But I guess I'm making a connection here between my own thinking and Maritain and dreams, because much of modern thought is based upon dreaming, and so I entitled the subsequent and final work in this trilogy a Masquerade of the Dreamwalkers, and it's about the development of Cartesian thought and subjective idealism from Descartes onward, from up to Hegel. And one of the things that I discovered when I finished this work was that Maritain was fundamentally right, that Western culture had largely lost its understanding of philosophy. As I started to work more deeply in this area, I became convinced that not only had we lost our understanding of philosophy, but we lost our understanding of science. And Maritain had been quite concerned about this loss of our understanding of science, or not of science, I should say, but of our understanding of philosophy. So was Adler, and so was Etienne Gilson. All three of them had more or less agreed that modern subjective idealism there had serious problems which displayed a lack of understanding of philosophy. I go beyond Maritain and Gilson and Adler in claiming also that not only did we lose our understanding of philosophy, we've lost our understanding of science. Historically, philosophy and science were considered to be identical subjects of study. But that's no longer the case. In the 20th century, philosophy and science, these two disciplines, became divorced, and with their divorce there became a separation of science and wisdom. In 2012, I wrote a book called The Not So Elementary Christian Metaphysics, with a subtitle of Written in the Hope of Ending the Centuries-Old Separation Between Philosophy and science and wisdom. And this graduate concentration with holy apostles is an extension of, at least on my part, is an extension of that research. Is an attempt to bridge that gap and restore the union between philosophy and science and wisdom. And this course, this initial course on the one and the many, right, among other things, is designed to show how philosophy and science are actually identical, but you can't understand how they're identical unless you consider both of them against the background of the problem of the one and the many. So the initial desire on my part to get in contact with holy apostles, aside from developing a joint graduate program in Thomistic studies, is basically to develop a new understanding of St. Thomas that I've already done initially in that work on a not so elementary Christian metaphysics. In fact, in 2013, I gave a talk, and I think it was in 2013. It might have been in 2012 at the end, but at the Catholic Information Center in Washington, D.C. And there's a YouTube video of that presentation, which I suggest that you might want to take a look at in relationship to this course. There's no need for you to get a copy of the Not So Elementary Christian Metaphysics, because a good deal of the material that I cover in that work in relationship to the one and the many I cover in this. And in fact, I've added subsequent research to that, which is included in a transcript that will accompany this video, but doesn't obviously appear in that book. Now it's time, more or less, for me to get into discussing with you the new activities and getting into, you might say, the meat of the course. Right? So the way I want to do that is by asking you 5 questions. And the reason I'm asking you these 5 questions is because I've done this with many classes over the years, and I found it to be very productive. These 5 questions are precise questions about who you are. Precisely, who are you? Precisely, where are you? How did you get here? Why are you here, precisely? And precisely where you want to go from here. Where do you want to go from here? Now, I pose those questions to you, and I pose them to myself simultaneously, because I conceive of the activity in which we are involved as a cooperative one. I look at a classroom instructor as a more advanced student, and in getting in touch with or becoming introduced to a new group of students, I often have the experience, I always have the experience, I should say, of being somewhat lost, because the ability to advance beyond simply being introduced to one another involves the ability to cooperate in a joint venture of learning. And how much we can advance in doing that individually and collectively depends upon precisely why we think we are involved in this project, in doing what we're doing. I have my own answers to these questions, but when which I'll give you. But when I ask you precisely, who are you? What I mean by that is this. And when I say we're lost, what I mean by that is this. There's a difference between being whoever you might be, John Doe or Jane Doe, and being John Doe who's lost. John Doe who has existed in a specific situation, right? And is entering a new situation where you want to remain only for a short time, if at all, and then move beyond it. Right? So, strictly speaking, you're not just you, and I'm not just me in this situation, but each of us is somewhat lost. And cooperatively, we are seeking to advance beyond this situation of being lost. Now, where we are is in an educational environment. We're in an educational school of higher education, not in a physical place so much, except in the sense of a remote place, but we're involved in an organizational activity. In a sense, what we're doing is we're uniting together into an organization engaged in a joint venture to advance beyond being lost educationally and to being able to make educational improvements. And we're doing that in a specific context. We're doing that in relationship to the Adler Aquinas Institute that has certain organizational goals and an organizational unity to it in light of those goals, and Holy Apostles College and Seminary. So studying the works of St. Thomas Aquinas within this context is somewhat different from studying it in another context. And so what you study, in a way, and the way you're going to study it is going to be affected by that. As someone who is involved in teaching this course for Holy Apostles College and Seminary, I consider myself to be a member of a faculty at a Catholic college and seminary that requires me to take on professional responsibilities and duties that are additional to my duties and responsibilities at some other institution. That means that I have to I have a more precise responsibility to respect the backgrounds of my students and the aims and the goals which they're seeking to pursue. And I can't do that completely without cooperation from students, more or less, in facilitating my ability to understand where they've come from and where they're going. So if we have cross purposes, diverse aims, we're not really belonging to the same organization. As someone who's involved in a Holy Apostles College and University program and also studying St. Thomas, we're both involved in a study that chiefly aims at improving us as human beings and enabling us to live happier lives. This is chiefly why I've been studying St. Thomas for years. And it's why I consider the chief activity in which I'm engaged in with you as that of a guide, as someone who's got a more advanced background in studying St. Thomas and who can introduce you to this particular area of study related to him, the one and the many, so that you will develop habits of thinking similar to St. Thomas through a study of this problem. And by virtue of developing those habits, you will gain an advantage in living a happier life. And many motives exist for students to take courses. They can do it for economic reasons, they can do it for social reasons, they can do so for technological reasons. You might want to get advance in pay, you might want to make social connections or make intellectual connections with people who might assist you to understand different things. You might want to work in this a new technological medium and become educated so that you gain job advantages, but none of those are the chief reasons for which I'm involved in this, or that, strictly speaking, you should be involved in it. Chiefly, that the activity in which we're involved is to develop a more precise and exact understanding of St. Thomas, so that that will improve us intellectually and personally, more than intellectually, also our emotions and our will. And we'll gain some insights as to how to live better lives from doing this. That being said, right, that's the chief purpose that I'm here, right? The more you are going to advance, the more I'm going to advance is in what we're doing will depend upon how much we are able to focus attention and keep that in mind as we go through this course. Now, having given you having asked you those questions, and I've asked, as I said, I've asked those on campus a lot of times, especially to students on the undergraduate level, because many people don't know precisely why they're in classes, and as a result, they waste time, and they waste a lot of time at a period of time in their lives when they could be doing something better to improve their lives. And not only will they not get a maximum out of their course of studies, but they'll be wasting time when they could have been doing something much more productive somewhere else. And I don't want anybody to wind up doing that. So think about that as we're going through this course. And I hope that what I'll present to you with respect to St. Thomas and his teaching on the one and the many will produce the kind of results which I think that it will, as far as improving your ability to live a happy life, oddly enough, or paradoxically maybe enough. So, well, how then do we advance beyond being lost? Since I've said that to some extent I'm lost, and we all have to be lost until we form an organization and cooperate to develop ourselves intellectually. And I'm quite serious when I say that. There are, in pretty much every semester that I've taught, there's an insight that I get from one student or another student that advances the research that I've been doing. And I never know when it's going to happen. I never know where it's going to come from. But it providentially appears just to happen out of the blue, and a student will say something, and it'll be related to something I'm researching. So I look forward to getting your insights on different issues that we'll be talking about throughout this semester. As far as advancing, I think one of the most important things to do in making progress in educationally developing is to avoid making initial mistakes. And I learned this decades ago from reading two quotes from Aristotle and from this great Catholic intellectual, I think the greatest Catholic intellectual of the 20th century, Etienne Gilson, in his work on the heavens and the earth. Aristotle cautions that small mistakes in the beginning can lead to numerous major mistakes down the road. He doesn't put it that way, but in the future. Or to put it another way, small mistakes in the beginning are big mistakes in the end. And Gilson says that Most philosophical mistakes are caused by badly framed questions. I take those very seriously, and I take them to heart. Just like in asking you those questions that I did right at the beginning here, it might seem innocuous, but they're really not. Okay, because basically what's happened as we've started this course is that we've formed ourselves into a class, into a group. We've gone beyond a group, but have formed into an educational group, just like becoming qualified to become members of a any kind of a specified group. And unless you do that, we can't easily cooperate. Well, to advance beyond that, it's really necessary to ask the right questions. And one of the biggest mistakes that people make in studying St. Thomas is that they make presumptions about what he taught. And this is done by pretty much every major student of St. Thomas that I've ever come across. All of the leading ones do this. I've done it myself. And I'm not as much of a major thinker as somebody like a Gilson. But I've learned from Gilson. And like St. Bernard of Chartres says, if we see further than our ancestors did, it's because we stand on the shoulders of giants. And this is one of the things I've always attempted to do, to develop the habits of mind of other people who are great intellects, so that I can take advantage of their habits of thinking, to be able to see further than they've been able to do. And one of the chief, I'm going to ask you four questions. I'm going to pose 4 questions, and I'm going to answer them. And I think that because a lot of students of St. Thomas, pretty much most students of St. Thomas never ask all of these questions, or most of them, they make mistakes in their starting points that lead them to make to wind up down the road being unable to explain what St. Thomas is doing to themselves or to other people. And the first of these questions is, I'm going to look down at my page here to remind myself, is why, first of all, start the study? Okay, let me backtrack here. Before getting into the problems of St. Thomas, I'm going to start this course, this program of studies, with this examination of the question of the problem of the one and the many. Now, I don't know of any student of St. Thomas that currently would do that. They would all start with a course, a whole program of study in metaphysics on St. Thomas's teaching about being. And the reason they do this is it makes a lot of sense. It's because St. Thomas developed a radically different understanding of being, a metaphysical revolution, as Gilson noted in the 20th century. But we're going to be starting our course of studies going over the transcendentals, unity, being, truth, goodness, and if you consider beauty a transcendental, also beauty. And we're not going to start with being. Now, I don't do this because I think that the study of unity is more important metaphysically to know about than it is to know about the principle of existence. Because the intelligibility of everything depends upon, depends upon its existence. If it doesn't exist, it can't be known. Or at least, if we can't relate it to something that exists in some way, right? We can't know something, even if it is a fiction, say. But the reason that I start with the problem of the one and the many is because metaphysics is a science, or a division of philosophy. Once again, for St. Thomas, science and philosophy are identical. If the study of the one and the many is essential to the activity of philosophy, of philosophizing, if it's essential to the nature of science, then if you want to engage in a scientific study of being, then you have to know about the problem of the one and the many. And unhappily, virtually no one who is a student of St. Thomas focuses on this question of the problem of the one and the many. And that causes them to make numerous mistakes. Now, when I say that St. Thomas considers the whole of science, the whole of philosophy, to be a problem, to be a study of the problem of the one and the many, people might take me at issue with that and say, well, no, the problem of the one and the many was a problem that was studied in ancient physics. That philosophy really begins with the development of logic after the interest in this problem of the one and the many. Right? And historically, that's not true. It's not true historically, and it's not true on the basis of the nature of philosophy. It isn't the case. The problem of the one and the many for the ancient Greeks extended throughout the entire course of the history of philosophy, from the initial beginnings of philosophy with the mythological poets, Homer and Hesiod, who Aristotle says, in a way, are philosophers, even the mytho-theologians. Why? Because they were studying the problem of the one and the many. How is it that in this universe of ours, this cosmos, there is one material, right, out of which the gods themselves come? And how is it that the gods are hierarchically ordered? Why is there one god higher than another god? And why is one god in control of a certain multitude of activities and another god in charge of another multitude of activities? I've examined this question of the problem of the one and the many extensively in this work I mentioned before, Wisdom's Odyssey, From Philosophy to Transcendental Sophistry. And there are two elements that are common, several elements common to all of the ancient Greek thinkers. One is that they presuppose the world has no beginning in the past and it has no end in the future. It's everlasting. Right? They presuppose that knowledge starts in the senses, that philosophy starts with the senses, right? That it starts in sense wonder, which we'll talk about in a little bit. They all consider there being some initial material that's everlasting, from which a multitude of materials develop, up until Parmenides, right, who was considered to be a physicist in antiquity. And when talking about the origins of the universe, the many doesn't deny the reality of sense knowledge. And when he talks about logos, is not talking about something which he considers to be immaterial, but is identifying with some sort of internal kind of mental activity involving the use of language and speech and so on. But he's simply denying that the many comes from the one. Right? That if what is one is totally permanent and unchanging, that the multitude can't come from it. And if you try to identify them, what you'll wind up with is with Zeno's paradoxes. That'll be a mistake. So it's that problem of the one and the many becomes extended, and Plato tries to resolve it by introducing a whole other world where you have a multitude of beings that have their own kind of unity to them, this world of forms, and something which is totally one, the good. Plato's dialogues are filled with every one of them deals in some way or other with the problem of the one and the many. Like in the Republic, how can one city be developed out of many cities? In the sense that, how do you get the virtuous city to be able to develop out of a city that is lacking in virtue? The question of the Meno, whether or not virtue can be taught, or how it's acquired. The question that Socrates deals with in the Credo about whether or not he should leave prison, because if he doesn't leave, what will the many think? And Socrates says, who cares what the many thinks? If you pay attention to Plato's dialogues, it's very clear that he's chiefly concerned there with solving that problem of the one and the many, as is Aristotle, whose metaphysics, for the most part, is chiefly concerned with the problem of the one and the many, which Aristotle says is convertible. Being and unity are convertible terms. So I'll get into that in more depth as we go along in the course. But why start with the problem of the one and the many? Because for the ancient Greeks, philosophy is a study of the problem of the one and the many. It's a problem that is involved in the study of opposites, as St. Thomas will say. And you can see this clearly if you examine any kind of science, even today, and the way it studies, like medical science, which studies not health, but health and disease. Or political science, in the classical, or even as it should be properly understood today, studies war and peace. It doesn't just study the one, but it studies opposites. And according to Aristotle and St. Thomas, the primary opposite is the opposition between a one and a many, or between parts and wholes. That is, the problem that causes us to wonder is how what appears to us to be one is many, or how what appears to us to be many is in some way one. What appears to us to be disconnected is not disconnected, but in some way or other constitutes parts belonging to a whole. So that's why we're starting with the problem of the one and the many. Because you can't do philosophy, you can't do science without understanding the problem of the one and the many. When the ancient Greeks looked around them in the world, at the universe, they considered the different subjects of scientific studies to be multitudes that had different principles of unity. Political unity is different from mathematical unity, which is different from medical unity, which is different from musical unity. And they thought that in order for them to understand the subjects that they studied scientifically, they had to understand that principle of unity, which gave to a thing its unity, which would give to a thing its operational nature, because it's only to the extent that a thing is one that it can act as one. So we don't start with the problem of being, therefore, even though you have to know about the existence of things and how the existence of things differs from the nature of a thing and so on, in order to understand metaphysics. We don't do that because we're engaged chiefly in this study as a scientific study. And even to comprehend being, you have to comprehend it in relationship to form, which is the principle of unity within a thing. So you never know it apart from unity. Why study opposites? Because as St. Thomas says, the whole of philosophy, the whole of science, as Aristotle says, the whole of philosophy, the whole of science involves a study of opposition. This is clearly seen in the ancient physics, where the study of the principles of qualitative change were identified as opposites, and where Aristotle comments that the great contribution that he makes, aside from discovering final causes, is this notion of substance, which can resolve the problem of opposition that the ancients had. Why study beauty? Well, in addition to good, you're going to study beauty to get a complete understanding of good, for one thing, because the good and evil are contrary opposites. Right? They're not contradictory opposites, right? As are the one and the many contrary opposites, as are the beautiful and the ugly contrary opposites. What we're studying in this course basically is not simply opposition, but the problem of contrariety, contraries, and how that discovery of the problem of contraries led the ancient Greeks to an understanding of, at least by the time of Aristotle, of why philosophy begins in wonder. And in the beauty and ugliness and good and evil, we focus attention on the notions of being whole and being deprived, especially because it's only with respect to something that is whole in its nature or whole in its being that it's good. So to understand what good is and to understand it in a composite sense, we can't do it except by understanding it in terms of opposition. The same thing goes with beauty. So this is why we're focusing attention on these particular courses in this program, and doing so in terms of opposition, precisely because the focus of attention on this course is on the crucial importance of this program, the crucial importance of understanding St. Thomas's teaching on contrariety, on contraries, and how by understanding what contraries are, that we'll be able to recover our understanding of why philosophy begins in wonder, and why the whole of philosophy and science are rooted in sense wonder, science as we understand it today. So it's going to be short, just a few minutes, where I'm going to cover the last 4 questions that are from video lecture 1, dealing with trying to resolve some misconceptions, possible misconceptions about St. Thomas's teaching. The first question is whether or not St. Thomas's teaching is, whether he considers philosophy to be a logical system. And strictly speaking, he does not. Strictly speaking, for St. Thomas, philosophy is a habit. It's not a system. And there are dangers in considering it to be a system that I will go over to show you why this is something good to avoid. Some of those include problems explaining how the 4 causes of Aristotle are related to philosophy, how philosophy is a virtue, how philosophy can, or science, since they're identical, can be one, possessed by one individual, how the proper language of philosophy or science is analogy, The proper language for logic is univocity. And if philosophy is a system, very often the tendency is going to be to identify it with a logical system and reduce the whole of philosophy to logic. The other question is whether philosophy is a view. And there again, according to St. Thomas, strictly speaking, no, it's not. Theoretical philosophy might be called a view, but there again, there's a danger in then considering philosophy to be some sort of a passive type of activity of viewing static essences, like looking at them through some sort of insight, when actually philosophy is wonder seeking explanation, not faith seeking explanation or faith seeking understanding, but wonder seeking understanding, wonder seeking explanation. The third question is, how can philosophy be theoretical or speculative and at the same time involve work? Strictly speaking, all intellectual activity involves work, especially when dealing with things that are difficult. But the answer to that is based upon the aim, the chief aim for which the intellectual work is being done. If it's being done simply to understand, then it's theoretical or speculative in the classical sense. If it's done to make something or to do something, then it's practical or productive or practical, I should say, to put it in the right order in answering the question. And finally, for Aristotle and St. Thomas, does not philosophy start in wonder? Yes, it does. It begins in wonder, as St. Thomas says, and it terminates in understanding. It begins actually with a very complex psychological act involving the emotions of fear and hope, as well as willing and a hope-filled desire related to convictions about the reliability of the senses, the reliability of the intellect, our intellectual faculty, the unity of truth, all of which I'll cover in the next video lecture for lecture 2 for this course series.